Hello everyone, welcome to another video, talking geeky stuff with me, Tensi. So some of you who are into video games will probably know that these are Capcom characters. Before we go into the main topic, I just want to show you a little video I cut together. It's kind of a little joke, a little fun. Cue the video. Yes, the video, as you can see at the end, was Capcom. Capcom versus everyone. It seems like it, right? Now it's Capcom versus these titles here. You can see that here's some of the titles. I think these are the majority of the titles that Capcom or Street Fighter has versus in the past and currently and maybe in the future. So going back to the versus series, it started off with, I think, back in the day with Street Fighter versus X-Men. It was in the arcades. Then, of course, it came out on the consoles. And I think I got it on a Sega Saturn. I actually prefer the Sega Saturn over the PlayStation because back then I was a massive fan of 2D fighting games. Big fan of Street Fighter 2. And with the Sega Dreamcast, especially my one was modified to play UK, American, and Japanese games. So I did a lot of importing games because some of those fighting games never really got released over here in UK. It's a lot better nowadays. Back then, UK, just like in most media, movies and everything else, we always get things late or sometime we never get it. So I had it modified so I can play games from all over the world. I ended up importing a lot of games from Japan and America. And the majority of games I purchased back then was 2D beat-em-ups. They had Street Fighter 2 series of the collector's edition. You had the alphas. Street Fighter 3 was on there. And then of course you had the Street Fighter versus, like Street Fighter versus X-Men 1, 2, and so on. And then when I was actually waiting for them to do a Street Fighter or Capcom versus SNK. Because back in the 90s, if you was in the 90s, a teenager in the 90s, you would know that the arcade scene was rocking. Street Fighter 2 was taking more money than any game in arcades. Teenagers was getting slapped on the wrist by their parents for spending all their their pocket money within a few hours. I know I did. Then of course you had the SNK side of things where people back then used to call it maybe the cheap man version of Street Fighter. Maybe when it started off a little bit with like Art of Heroes, then a lot of the characters really copied the characters from Street Fighter. But I think you had then of course Face of Fury was a classic game. You had the established characters like Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and so on. Then of course they went on to release King of Fighters, which was a fantastic series, great designing characters and so on. So back then when I was a teenager, in arcades playing Street Fighter 2, Champion Edition, all of that. But on the side there I was playing a lot of SNK games as well. I remember one of my friends got a Neo Geo console. He used to go around his house and play all the time. And I eventually got it later on in life. But the cartridges, they were big cartridges. They were actually the size of consoles. And back then, you're talking about £200, £300 each cartridge. But you know what? If you got them now, in mint condition, they're worth like 3 times that much now. So it's actually a pretty good investment if you had them. So yeah, so you know, when we were teenagers, we used to think about wouldn't it be awesome to have like Street Fighter versus King of Fighters, you know, Street Fighter versus Face of Fury, so on. Because Capcom had other beat 'em up games of like Darkstalkers, Power Stone, and a few others. Even that kind of, it didn't do so well, but I didn't really mind. It was a Street Fighter EX series, you know, like sort of 2D, 3D Street Fighter game. And who remembers that Street Fighter game based on the movie? Oh, that was terrible. So yeah, so once they released it, you know, Street Fighter versus X-Men, then of course yes, Street Fighter versus King of Fighters or whatever. They went on to Capcom versus SNK. Then they kind of dropped the name of Street Fighter and went straight to Capcom because they incorporate all the Capcom characters. Then you had like Capcom versus Marvel. What else is there? Capcom versus Tatsunoko. I can't pronounce the name. Got it on the Wii. And that's a good game. It's a shame they didn't continue that series. You know, yeah, kind of anime characters versus Capcom characters. Fantastic game. Of course, you have Capcom versus the Marvel. I got Capcom versus Marvel 1, 2 on Dreamcast, of course. And then the newest one on PlayStation 4. 1 and 2 was still the better one. 3 was not bad. I didn't mind it. Then of course, you got Street Fighter versus Tekken, and so on. So I love those versus franchises. But I do prefer the classic kind of 2D more. I know they're all kind of 2D, but I just prefer the kind of 2D Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 3, Alpha series kind of gameplay graphics. 4 graphic styles, not bad. You know, it's a shame what Capcom did with Street Fighter 5. Hopefully, it can bounce back with Street Fighter 6. But I'm eagerly waiting to see what are the Capcom versus. Me personally, I would love to see a Capcom Nintendo. You kind of got it. I mean, you got both Ken and Ryu in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. You know, there might be one more Capcom character in Smash Bros. I mean, everybody's looking forward to maybe a Dante. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see Dante, another sword fighting character. But me, I would like to see a Leon from the Resident Evil series, myself personally. But if it's Dante, I don't mind either. So I'd love to see like a full-on Nintendo versus Capcom. That'd be cool. Wait a minute, not to forget, you also got Mega Man. Mega Man's in Ultimate Smash Bros. As well. So that is 3 Capcom characters. So yeah, full-on Nintendo versus Capcom would be good. Capcom versus Sega would be pretty good. Is there one? Is there Capcom versus Sega? I need to look that up. I mean, Sega got their own like Virtua Fighters. They can have a good Street Fighter versus Virtua Fighter game. You can imagine having, like in one of the backgrounds, you see Crazy Taxi in the background, right? And one of the specials where you activate one of the Crazy Taxis to come in and just run you over. That'd be awesome. Then you got, I would say, more Capcom versus Namco. I know we got Tekken, but Tekken does have Soul Calibur as well, so I'd like to see a good Capcom Namco. Maybe a Capcom versus Dragon Ball Universe. That'd be amazing. What else? Capcom versus DC Universe, and Capcom versus Mortal Kombat. Those are the games I would love to see in the future. Who knows? They may be on the cards. Let me know. What is your favorite Capcom versus or Street Fighter versus? And if you was a publisher and a developer, imagine which company would you versus against? Let me know in the chat. Or in the comments, sorry, in the chat, comment, same thing. But, well, that wraps it up for me. Big fan of these kind of games. Eagerly waiting for the next verses. And, like before I go, I like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Please stay safe. Goodbye.